Welcome to the Jiu Jitsu Crucible podcast.
Roger doesn't lose this kind of control. He's not the guy who loses this kind of control. I think he got it. I think he's gonna get it.
Buchecha on the choke here, really close to finishing. Excuse me, Roger on the close to Buchecha. It looks very
He's gonna get it.
Join us as we talk about competition, recreational training, business development, and all things Jiu Jitsu. Strength and honor.
Strength and honor! All right, guys, welcome to the Jiu Jitsu Crucible podcast, episode 5. We are here with Cameron LePage. How you doing, Cameron?
Really good, Pat. I've been following all the episodes so far, so I'm really stoked to be here.
All right, so Cameron, why don't you go and tell us about yourself a little bit, and how old you are, how you got into jiu-jitsu, so on and so forth.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm 36 years old right now, currently the head instructor at a gym in Bradford, Ontario called Paradigm Martial Arts. I've been training jiu-jitsu this is my 20th year now. I started back in 2006. So originally, I started doing karate and stuff like that when I was a kid. I was obsessed with like martial arts movies and things like that, like, Karate Kid, Surf Ninjas, and Mortal Kombat. So I started training martial arts when I was really young. I fell off it a little bit in my teen years, and then The Ultimate Fighter came out, and I had never seen grappling before, and watching, I think it was Diego Sanchez, the first fight I ever saw in The Ultimate Fighter was Diego Sanchez versus Josh Koscheck, and just watching him go for guillotines and stuff like that. I was like, I didn't even know that was a possibility. So I very quickly became obsessed with MMA, and then joined the wrestling team the next season. And then from there, met a guy who trained jiu-jitsu. So I started training with him, and the rest is history. I originally really wanted to get into MMA, so that's why I started training jiu-jitsu in the first place.
So what age were you when you met this guy and kind of started training jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, so he was on my wrestling team. He was a year younger than me. So we wrestled for a season, and then he told me how his karate gym had started a jiu-jitsu program there. So I went with him, and I was 18 years old. I think it's kind of funny, though, because when I went to my first jiu-jitsu class, I had actually signed up for a tournament first. So I had found, at the time, I think like one of the only tournaments happening in Ontario was the Joslins Open. So I had signed up for Joslins and showed up to my first jiu-jitsu class telling the instructor how I'm fighting on this date and I need to learn some jiu-jitsu. So hindsight, like as an instructor now, I would have looked at a student like he was crazy if that was the case. So I can only imagine that the instructor thought I was a little nuts at the time.
So you started doing jiu-jitsu at 18. How old are you now?
36, yeah. So this is, going to be, I guess, this is my 19th year. So 19th years of jiu-jitsu.
So, you started obviously as a hobby,
Yep.
and now you do it as, your employment.
Yeah.
Kind of like unpack that. You started when you were 18, and why don't you take the listeners through like your belts? When did you get your blue, purple, brown, black belt?
Yeah, for sure. So I originally started, like I said, training for MMA. So I was doing some boxing at the time, and wrestling in high school, and doing jiu-jitsu. So jiu-jitsu was kind of like the supplement for my MMA training, but striking kind of came naturally to me. So I focused a little bit more on my grappling just because it was initially a lot harder to get good at. So when I first started training, it was 2006. I got my blue belt in 2008, then changed gyms and got my purple in 2012. And then this is what I like to refer to as like my road tour. I was living all over the place. So I was in California for a brief stint. I was in Winnipeg for a little while, and then out in Vancouver, back to Toronto. So my purple belt years, I changed instructors so many times that I ended up staying at purple belt for 7 years. Got my brown belt in 2019, and then I got my black belt in 22.
Gotcha. So, purple belt for 7 years.
Yeah.
And you said you moved around. So how old were you when you got your purple belt?
When I got my purple belt, I think I was 23. Yeah, I think I was 23 when I got my purple belt. And purple belt was when I got my most distracted from training, if I'm honest. Like, not only just like the moving around and stuff, but it was the least consistent of my training. It was time where, living on my own, so I had to focus on work a little bit. So if I'm honest, I shouldn't have been there for 7 years, but got a little distracted with life. So that was the point where I was probably my most hobbyist. All the other times I was training pretty diligently and competing a lot, but purple belt was where I fell off for a bit.
So, one of the main approaches and angles that I'm looking to give the audience with this episode is how you basically started off because you really liked it, or we're going to call it a passion project.
Yeah, for sure.
And then, if I'm not mistaken, this became kind of a paid gig, like your employment.
Yep.
When you were kind of leaving purple, becoming a brown belt, correct?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So, I need you to take a few minutes, and I know it's kind of like an ambiguous question.
Yep.
But from 18, and what age did you get your brown belt?
31. Yeah, 31.
You got your brown belt at 31.
Yeah.
So, what was that? It must have been a roller coaster, because, that's 13 years.
Yeah.
Engaged, not engaged.
Yep.
Like you said, you're moving out. I don't know if you're meeting girls. Like, why don't you try to contextualize it?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing was, when I was really young, like 18 to, I'd say 24, like, I was all in. I was training a lot, competing a lot. The goal was to fight professionally. And then, my biggest issue is I don't think I had any really good mentors to help guide me at that point. So without any proper, like, direction, I just didn't kind of know how to transition to the next step of, like, how do I become a professional martial artist, whether it's as a competitor or whether it's in a teaching capacity. And I didn't know how to do that. So, and the other thing is I didn't know how to ask. So not only didn't I have mentors, I was just too shy or too nervous to kind of ask for that guidance. So that's where I think my journey kind of segued a little bit at that time. Is, life happens, you get distracted, and instead of dialing in on the goal, I just let myself get distracted. There was a point there where I was doing well at my office job and training maybe once a week, if that, and there was a point where I was like, maybe this just isn't what I'm going to be able to do. And I got lucky. A friend of mine runs the academy that I teach at, and he needed an instructor. He could match my salary at the time, so it was a no-brainer. So I was really fortunate to kind of luck into that opportunity, and then it gave me like a second wind, I would say. Like, now it's all I do, it's all I focus on, like, and something that I'm very, very fortunate for, that I can do it professionally. So
one of the things I want to ask you, because I've seen a lot of people fall into this trap, and you said I didn't have a mentor.
Yeah.
But this is where I think it becomes a slippery slope.
Yep.
Is it, I understand you didn't have a mentor, but on some level, was that because there wasn't the right people, or was it you kind of thought you knew better, you wanted to do your own thing, and you had all these things going on? Because I often see people struggle to take advice, whether that advice is good, bad, or indifferent. Because at the end of the day, I'm of the belief most people want to do what they want to do, and that's going to circumvent most things.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying there. I think in my instance, it was a combination of like three factors. One, I didn't really have any good mentors, and two, is I wasn't asking anybody. I was expecting to be noticed based off of my skill on the mat, and that somebody would kind of like approach me and take me under their wing. And I wasn't putting myself out there and asking, and I wasn't doing the work myself to get those opportunities. I was just kind of waiting for it to happen. And hindsight, I would have done things much differently. I also, being an athlete, like I've always played sports, whether it was soccer, rugby. I never wasn't in a sport, so I've always been a very coachable athlete. So I don't think there was any issue with me not taking advice. I think it was not taking the initiative and the ownership for myself to actually seek out people to help me in those situations. It was, again, a little bit of hubris of like, look how good I am. I'm tapping all these guys in the gym. Like, why isn't anybody helping me? Versus me, taking that opportunity and looking for guidance elsewhere.
So if you could roll the clock back to, say, 22 years old,
Yep.
what would you have done differently?
I think the biggest thing I would have done differently is not get, again, in my head about this hubris and be way more humble in the fact that it's like, no, if you want something, you have to go actively seek it. I think, that be my biggest advice to any athletes out there that are looking for, a career in martial arts is you can't expect that your skills are going to speak for themselves. Like there's so many other factors. You need to have communication skills if you want to be an instructor. You need to be personable. You need to be coachable. So my biggest advice would be to seek out somebody that you think can guide you well and listen. Like that would be one of my biggest things is you need to get out there. You need to take those opportunities upon yourself. Like you can't just wait for things to happen. And that would be my biggest, if I went back, that would be the biggest thing is I think I would have switched gyms to a more appropriate instructor and, really seeked out some mentorship and tried my hardest to actually dive into it rather than being kind of complacent and waiting for it to happen.
What do you think? Because I also think a lot of people get in their own head about the kind of gym that they need to be at.
Yeah.
Because they'll often maybe just associate that with the instructor or maybe the skill. And what I mean by the skill,
Yeah.
I mean just, his ability to roll or what his level of jiu-jitsu was. But said instructor, he's not going to the tournaments on the weekend. He doesn't have any interest in that. He's not really going to provide opportunities for athletes. And I think all instructors have something different to offer, and we all do some things better than others.
Yeah.
And I think one of the unique things about me is I'm in a unique place with my time in the industry and my age, and quite frankly, how much I travel and who I know. I can provide a lot of unique opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
But in working with so many athletes, I believe that is not even a consideration for most athletes in terms of like opportunity, because you kind of fell in the opportunity to become a professional.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting take because I think it comes down to a lot of different things in that regard. Like, the one aspect is developing your craft as a martial artist. You need to be able to develop your skill. So, when you're seeking out an instructor, you want to be able to find somebody who's going to be able to that they work well with you and that their, teaching style is something that you're going to benefit from. I'm not everybody's best instructor. Some people are going to learn better from somebody else. Somebody, I'm exactly the ideal instructor for them. So it's a weird, delicate balance where you have to find somebody who is going to be able to connect with you and coach you in terms of skill. So first we have skill development. After that, then we need to start looking at things like, okay, well, now I'm a good martial artist, but what skills do I have? Do I know how to coach? Is that another skill that I'm adding to my repertoire? Do I know how to run a gym? Do I know how to work leads? If you're looking at the business side of things, there's so many other aspects to it. So, I would almost say, like, maybe find a coach that, if you can find one that can do everything, that can provide you opportunities competition-wise, opportunities, coaching-wise, and, exposure to high-level guys, that's ideal. Somebody who could teach you the skill and teach you, the business side and give you, depending on what route if you're going competitor, if you're going instructor, or if, competitor and then you're going to veer off into instructor, you need to be able to have somebody that's going to guide you through those transitions. So I think in a lot of opportunities, I don't think students are really looking at all those facets. I think they're looking at just skill development. So when we're just looking at skill development, I think that's where students are going to overlook, like, the bigger picture. I would say that, if you can't find somebody who can do it all, you now need to start looking at, like, almost increments. Somebody who's going to help develop my skills. Now that I have the skills as a martial artist, I can do jiu-jitsu well. Now I need to maybe look for somebody who can provide me opportunities on the competition scene, or somebody who can provide me opportunities as a coach. And then lastly, again, when you're pivoting, who can help you with the business side? Because I've seen a lot of great martial artists that are terrible gym owners that can't actually run a business. But, they're great on the mats. They're killers. They win medals. So, if you're looking at all these different pathways in the sport and that progression long term, you need to be able to find maybe a multitude of different instructors that can guide you. If you can find one that can do it all, that's the jackpot. But I think those are, kind of unicorns in that regard. Somebody who can provide opportunities, develop your skills, and also guide you on the business side.
So one of the things that's obviously a very kind of hot button topic in the industry, and I'm sure that we can agree, 99% of our industry is practitioners, and then there's like 1% instructors.
Yeah.
And point of views can change and differ now that you're an instructor, because the bulk of the industry only makes considerations based on being students. So I often find that student-instructor relationship, it can be a complex dynamic. And, I think there's got to be give and take on both sides. And I think you have this generation of instructors that are like, no, I'm the teacher, you're the student, you need to do what I say. And then I think you have these students that the moment there's the first friction point, they're just like, fuck that, I'll get another teacher.
Yeah.
So what is your kind of thought on that dynamic? Because I do think the student-instructor relationship is important. I think us as students and now instructors, I feel we can speak about it with a little bit more experience because we are still both students and we're still both currently instructors. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would definitely agree. It's, when I first came up, I look at some of the instructors didn't want us cross-training at other gyms. Like, you can't go train anywhere else. Like, oh, you can't learn from instructionals. Like, they wanted to be, I don't know whether it was a scarcity mindset. They wanted to be the singular hub of your jiu-jitsu journey. And I think there's a lot of people that still have that old school mindset where it's like, no, you come to me. And, for example, I want my students to go everywhere because if you go and learn something else, cool, show it to me. I wanna be able to have that skill set. One of my students is a constant studier, and he oftentimes shows me things where I'm like, oh, cool, I hadn't actually seen that before. Now I'm going to use that. Now I'm even going to use it when I'm teaching in class. And I think, in both regards, you need to have that humility. As an instructor, you can't, nobody, unless you're a Galvao or Gordon Ryan, you don't know everything in jiu-jitsu. You're not an expert on every single aspect. So you're going to have to be humble and recognize that your students are maybe going to need skills that you don't have in jiu-jitsu. So you need to be open to them, whether it's instructionals, whether it's cross-training at other gyms. You can't be that central hub. So I think a lot of instructors need to kind of ditch that authority or God complex that they are the masters and you need to, listen to what I do. I'm here to guide your journey, but it's your journey. So you need to decide what's best for you, whether it's, you need to take a break from competition, whether you want to make mistakes in competition. Mistakes are how we learn. So I'm going to give you my advice. I'm going to give you my 2 cents, but it's ultimately up to you to, one, be coachable, but two, you're going to have to make those mistakes on your own. So I think, from the instructor side, that's a big thing, is just, you need to give your students the freedom to make mistakes, because they're going to. From the student side, again, I think it's not putting your instructor on a pedestal. They're a person as well. So when they make mistakes, it's how, like any relationship, you need to be able to reconcile that, and you need to be able to work forward. We're always going to have varying opinions on things. So just because there's that point of contention where maybe you guys don't agree on a subject doesn't necessarily mean that person still doesn't have something of value. So I think you need to step back and look at the bigger picture of okay, so we disagree on this aspect, but what else can my instructor still provide for me that is going to be beneficial? So, if you're looking at it like the relationship that it is, jiu-jitsu is not, a quick sport. This is, how many people it takes 10, 12 years to get their black belt. You're going to be in the sport for a while unless you wash out quickly. So you should be looking at the idea that this is going to be a long-term relationship with your instructor and a long-term relationship with your student. And I think the more that people have that view, I think the better that they're going to work in symbiosis together to ultimately accomplish their goals.
So one thing that's interesting, you brought up Galvao and Gordon.
Yeah. And
they do have some of these rules that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, and I agree with you in the sense that you used the phrase unicorn.
Yeah.
So what do you think of them having rules or expectations of their students?
I mean, one, they have the name and the accomplishments and the skill sets to kind of demand that. Two, they are running a business, and their business is competition, so they are trying to protect their brand. So I understand it from a brand perspective as well. Do I necessarily agree with it? I mean, maybe not all of them. Again, it's looking at it from a hobbyist perspective, because let's be honest, unless you're a Gordon and a Galvao, most of your students are going to be hobbyists. So having those rules for hobbyists, I don't necessarily agree with that, for example. I think that you should be much more open, because these people, one, they're paying your bills, and two, they're not going to be the ones representing you on a world stage. So you need to be a lot more flexible, I think, with them. Maybe for your competitors, have some more strict rules, so that way you can create a bigger team dynamic and more cohesion there. But I think when you're looking at the bigger picture of what is your student base, I think you should kind of have as little rules as possible. You should give them the freedom. It's their journey. I'm not here to dictate it. I'm here to guide you on your journey. That's at least my view.
So I want to ask you another question that I find interesting. For example, if you're at a school and you have an instructor and they impose a rule, and you brought it up, so I'll use that as the example, cross-training.
Yep.
You can't cross-train at any other gyms. And if a student were to say, okay, I don't feel comfortable with that, so I'm going to go to another gym. So I'm assuming you would understand that, or you're okay with that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've changed instructors almost across every belt for the most part. Like, you know, different from white to blue, different from purple. I mean, I had multiple instructors over purple, and then different from brown. So, you know, students are going to come and go. And if they don't agree with how you're doing things, then you know what? I wish them the best. I hope that they find somebody that provides them with what it is they need. Ultimately, you know, like I said, I'm not everybody's ideal instructor, but for some people, I'm absolutely perfect for. You know, so I think the bigger thing is just trying to, who can I service, who can I help, and who can I best benefit. And if I'm not your cup of tea, by all means, please, I'll give you a list of people that you can go to that I would recommend have good jiu-jitsu, and, you know, go check them out. But that's my personal philosophy. I think a lot of instructors out there definitely get really, you know, butthurt or really take that ego hit. And, you know, the first couple times I lost a student to another academy, there is that party that's like, man, it doesn't feel good. But it is part of the game. An unfortunate part, but it is part of the game. And that's why I think if you have a more open environment, you're going to see less of that, you know.
So do you believe, though, then, Cameron, so say we have this scenario where the instructor has enforced rules, the student doesn't agree, so he just goes and instructs, shakes the instructor's hand, says, this isn't for me, I'm going to go elsewhere. If I understand, you're okay with that. But now, this is where I feel in our industry, there's a bit of a double standard.
Yep.
So the instructor posts these rules, the individual doesn't agree, and he's like, well, I'm going to do it anyways. And the instructor's like, that's fine, I respect your opinion. But now the instructor takes it upon himself to tell the student, you need to go train somewhere else. I find, you know, I'm unpacking what you said.
Yep.
If there's this pain point and the student wants to leave, it's their journey, it's okay. If the instructor sets a rule, I feel, whether people agree with it or not, and again, we can use Atos as an example, they have a very, very stringent uniform policy. A lot of people in the industry and, you know, students don't like that.
Yep.
So, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think the instructor should be criticized because he lays out his vision, his expectations, and if you don't adhere to it, you're not welcome at that gym?
Well, one, I do think that's just how it has to be. Like, if you set rules and expectations and a student's not following them, then ultimately they're not good for your culture, at least the one that you're trying to build. So I think that has to be, like, you have to draw those boundaries, and that student has to go. Because, you know, the worst thing that you can have for your academy is somebody who is just in there, you know, spreading poison and corrupting the rest of the student base. So, you know, that person needs to go at that point. As far as uniform policies, I see it from both sides. As a student and, like, as somebody who likes the idea of, you know, gis are expensive. People like to show off their individuality. I love how jiu-jitsu has a very laid-back vibe. At least in a lot of cases, it's, you know, it's kind of, there's a lot of, like, surfing culture almost, where it's, you know, kind of chill, train how you feel type thing. And I like that. And part of me doesn't want to ever see that go. But at the same time, on the business side, it makes a lot of sense. You know, it makes, like, financially, you know, if everybody's wearing the same uniform, like, it's an obvious no-brainer, like, low-hanging fruit as far as, like, revenue-wise. As well as, I think there's one thing that people don't really pay attention to, but it's that subtle idea of culture. We're all now wearing the same uniform. We're on that same team. If you want to create that kind of bonding experience, that we're all coming together, forming a community, I think the uniform has a huge benefit to that, as far as, like, creating that uniformity. Like, we all come here and we're together in this. So I feel like you're darned if you do, you're darned if you don't. Like, if you create the uniform policy, you're going to alienate people. But I think without a uniform policy, you create the opportunity at least for like cliques and things like that, and you create a little bit less of that uniformity if you want to really create like longevity and a big culture in your academy. So personally, I would never do it, but again, I see the arguments for it.
So Cameron, would you agree that your perspective has undergone an evolution when you transitioned from being a student to an instructor?
Oh, without question, so many different things and so many different aspects that I had never even thought of. When I was just a student and just training, I just thought like teaching jiu-jitsu would just be awesome. I just get to do jiu-jitsu all day. I didn't realize how many other dynamics there are to it. Just the amount of little tiny fights in between like students and little like trivial arguments that I have to weigh in on because these two can't get along and stuff like that. I didn't realize how much of that actually really goes on behind the scenes. So there's that big aspect to it. The retention strategies and things like that are things that I never thought of. And the biggest one to me is also one that Matt Hashay kind of impressed upon me my first day of instructor training. He had mentioned how it's like when we're running an academy, everybody's here for a different reason, but also everybody has a different home life. So there's some people that have a terrible home life. This might be the only place where we can provide something positive for them. So we have so much more impact and power than we realize beyond teaching jiu-jitsu, where we can create a safe and like one of the only positive environments for a lot of people that might not have that in their regular life. So it's a different responsibility that I didn't realize when I was just a student. How much power people are paying their money to come to us. Like we have a lot of responsibility to them.
So do you think it's fair to say, Cameron, that when you transition from being a full-time professional instructor that you are now, and now you transition into an ownership of an academy, would you not expect to have another further evolution in your mentality?
Oh, I definitely. There's so many things that just running a program versus managing everything and being responsible for the academy, being responsible, you're employing people, having that kind of level of responsibility. I can only imagine that when I get to that stage in my career that I'm going to have another plethora of changing opinions based off of, the newer experiences when there. And I think that's the big thing that I've been thankful for in my journey is I've been able to see so many different aspects, and I think my opinions have dramatically changed over time, and I can only assume that they're going to continue to do so as I'm exposed to more facets of the sport.
So let me ask you this question, because I feel very strongly about this, but I'm interested to hear your take. You have relationships, varying degrees of engagement with your students.
Yep.
But a lot of these students kind of come into your ecosystem and you're giving them like a lot of love, whether it be, that's the right word or not, but you're giving them a lot of attention.
Yep.
You are going above and beyond to help them. And you're kind of, to a degree, pouring your heart and soul into the development of a lot of these students. And I'm of the mind, a lot of good instructors do that routinely, like above and beyond the call of duty. What are your thoughts on that?
I think you have to. Again, going back to Matt's point, like we have a responsibility to our students. We don't know what's going on outside of their lives. Some of them let us know, but we have to be able to create something special for them. Jiu-jitsu is now everywhere. There's so many gyms to go to. You have, online, there's all the jiu-jitsu ever created. They have access to it. If you just have a training partner, you can get really good training by yourself using instructionals. Like, I've seen some guys that all they did was train with instructionals and another blue belt, and kids winning American nationals. Like, so you can do a lot by yourself. The reason why people come to us is because of what we create beyond just the art. And I think that it's our responsibility and it's our duty to be able to provide something beyond that. So It's not just a simple, hey, what's up? It's no, like, I know your kids. How are they doing? Like, some of them are in the program, knowing like details about their family life, trying to get to create those opportunities and those connection points with them. That's what's going to keep people in your academy longer, but also that's going to create the environment that you want as an instructor. We want to have a place where everybody feels welcome. You don't want to have an academy, or at least I wouldn't anyway, want an academy where it's just a bunch of people showing up, training for their own intention. Nobody cares about each other. Nobody's helping each other. They're just battling each other every day. I want to create a place where even if you're not training, you're injured, you come and you watch because you like the atmosphere. Not so much because you want to get better at jiu-jitsu, but you're coming because you get to see your buddy and you're now getting to say hi. You're getting like the deeper bonds of community beyond just the sport of jiu-jitsu. And I think that is something that we need to, as a culture in jiu-jitsu, I think we need to really elevate that idea of creating a place for people rather just developing their skills.
So I believe, and I want to touch on this, is I believe that there's a disparity. And I think the disparity, again, it's the vast majority of the population of our sport. And I'm going to give you an example. We talked about the cross-training rule.
Yeah.
And if there's a student that wants to leave because he doesn't like the rule, it seems like most of the industry can get behind that. Yes, go. But it also seems if an instructor kicks a student out for non-compliance to a rule that he set, it's well known that that instructor can often like be burned in effigy in Reddit and these different online forums.
Yeah.
So why do you think, in your opinion, that double standard exists? Because it's clear and obvious.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is clear and obvious. I think I think the reason why that double standard exists is two facets. One, people like students, again, they don't necessarily see the bigger picture. They're watching their own journey, so they don't realize what it is to create culture and to create an environment for students. And like them or not, the rules help to create those cultures. So if I'm trying to create a very diligent and focused culture, I'm going to set some rules and some boundaries. And if you're not going to adhere to them, then you're not helping to create that culture and helping to persist it. Instead, you're working against it. So you do have to go. I think one of the reasons why we can potentially receive a lot of backlash is people just don't understand that dynamic. They're just not on the other side of the fence, so they can't.
Sorry there, just that little interruption.
Yeah, but back to the point that I was saying is when the student doesn't have the bigger picture that an instructor is creating rules to create culture, they see them as arbitrary. So because they see them as arbitrary, it just seems like, well, that just doesn't seem fair. So I shouldn't, I should be allowed to leave, and you shouldn't be allowed to set those rules. And I, like it or not, if you're an instructor, you're a forward-facing person, you're a public person at that point, so you're always going to be open to backlash and criticism. So I think that's the reason why that double standard exists, and I don't really see it ever going away either, sadly.
So another thing that you hear all the time, and from my point of view, I think it's I might catch some flack for this, but I think it's a lot of these random blue belts that write these online articles for these BJJ sites. But there is this mentality of I pay for a membership, this is transactional, I'm a consumer, and if I don't like it or I don't like something, I can go where I want. And I feel I'm one of the biggest capitalists ever, and I'm the ultimate consumer, and I agree with that. But that comes with a caveat. you know, and like, for example, we have traveled together. When we travel together, I don't think I treat you like a random student. I think I go above and beyond. And so if this mentality exists that, hey, I'm a paying customer, this is transactional, then my question is that same individual okay being just treated like a number or just like every other student? Because if the student is going above and beyond for all, or the instructor is going above and beyond for his students, and you have this one student that's just saying, hey, it's transactional, I'm a consumer, and they're treated as such, I believe that's fair and just. But I think that student would have a fundamental problem with that.
I would agree in both regards. I think there's a lot of people, especially early in their journey, and I would say this comes from a lot of like younger people where they view it as transactional, right? I just want to get good at jiu-jitsu. I'm just here for jiu-jitsu. But for example, when I look at like, we just had grading yesterday, and I have a 49-year-old on the mats, training with all these young guys, and he's not here for anything other than the environment and the culture that we create. It's because he likes the people. It's because of what he likes, and I think as we age, more and more you will see that transactional ideology kind of dissipates, because the older we are, we get a little bit more perspective and experience in life, and you're going to realize that we are creating something different. It's so hard to have a lot of deeper connections today, and the jiu-jitsu gym is a great place where that can become an opportunity. And I think that student will probably evolve as they get older if they continue to train, and that transactional mindset will probably change for them. In the meantime, though, I think that it's totally justified if you just treat them like a customer. But I think if you want to be, again, going above and beyond, then no matter if you dislike or if you have any, you don't agree with their stance, if you want to be the person to help guide them and change that mentality, you have to still continue to go above and beyond and try to create that deeper connection. Even if there's going to be friction points, even if there's, you're not going to get that same love in return, I think it's our job as instructors to help that. They're only going to learn by what they receive. So if I treat it as transactional, then they're never going to evolve past transactional. So if I continue to try to treat them like family and try to go above and beyond, then maybe I'll get through to them, maybe I won't. And that's part of the heartbreak of an instructor, is you're just not going to reach everybody, and people are going to come and go. But if I want to go to bed at night knowing I did my best job, I want to leave the mats knowing that I treated everybody the same, and I try to create that environment experience for everyone.
So what do you think of this? Because I think this is another interesting point, and then we can switch topics. But we know we have a lot of athletes that switch instructors or teams frequently to improve. And it seems like the community, certainly the internet, they're like go, and they're like all rah, and they're like, you got to do what you got to do for your career. If this is the right move, you need to do that. And what's interesting is, to me, I understand because there are both sides. But again, I feel we have a community that is always with the competitor. Now we have this hyper small subsection of the industry, 1% or less, the instructors, the academy owners, that put all this effort into these athletes. And we as a community are just saying, hey guys, you're the school owners, you guys teach the community at large, but suck it up. If they want to leave, they want to leave. And we have, this, I believe, this evolving mentality that is evolving more, where we're just telling the owners of the academies, the teachers, the elders of the community, yeah, too bad. What are your thoughts on that?
again, I think it depends on it's going to vary case to case, obviously, but I think sometimes students are quicker to change academies based on a potential poor result and not wanting to reflect and take accountability on like what was it they were doing in their training, what was it they do they understand the rules as deeply as they think they do, like have they done everything in their power, and is it truly the ceiling of the instructor as to why you failed, or is it because maybe you're not coachable, maybe you weren't diligent enough in your training, maybe you had a bad game plan and like you're refusing to evolve. I think we've all seen those guys that come through and it's like they're killers at blue, and then the second they get to purple, for whatever reason, they stagnate and they don't really get any better from that. So is it because they're not switching academies fast enough, or is it because there's something that they're not doing themselves and the student doesn't want to reflect and be like, I'm maybe the problem here and maybe I do need to be more coachable. But then I think there's also instances where, for sure, yeah, your instructor can only take you so far, and maybe you've gotten everything from that particular individual, and maybe it is time to move on. And again, like we talked about at the beginning of the episode, maybe your journey is starting to switch. You had somebody who could teach you jiu-jitsu, but now you need somebody who can provide you opportunities, and your instructor doesn't have connections or the networking skills to provide you opportunities. So it's a weird one to answer, because again, it is so case dependent. It is just one of those unfortunate things of.
Well, let me pivot and ask you a question in a different way. We know, okay, and the industry knows, it's a no-brainer. Are there scumbag instructors?
Oh, 100%.
And
there are scumbag students too.
Okay, but what I'm saying is the industry at large is very, for the most part, very apprehensive to say that. Like, you get these instructors that are lazy, they sit down, they're texting on their cell phone, they're talking about the girls in class, they're banging the girls in their in their school.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot wrong with a lot of instructors. I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
However, there's a lot wrong with a lot of students.
100%.
And I just feel when there's a conflict, say with a high-profile student and a high-profile instructor, I just feel like, the default is support the student. And I'm just like, I think a lot of the instructors in this industry have gone through a lot, and I just don't think the instructor cadre of the industry as a whole is deserving of that.
Yeah, that's again, I think some of the bad apples really kind of sully, so many of the good instructors out there that don't get their flowers. It's
absolutely
like,
that's very common.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the worst parts is, again, because instructors are forward facing, we're public faces, like, we're going to catch way more flack. Students, they're a private person, so a student that's a scumbag and like a degenerate and toxic for every gym, like we've all seen a student like that, where it's like no matter where they go, they're not going to be, unless they massively do some work and change themselves, like they're not going to be good for really the culture of any gym, and they I think it's just human nature. There's some people suck, and it's a weird dynamic where we all support the student, and in a lot of instances I don't necessarily know that is the right thing, but at the same time, given the power dynamic, maybe it has to be that way to make sure that we do hold some of these bad instructors accountable, because there's a lot more that aren't also exposed, and that's another sad truth. So it's an interesting dynamic, but I don't really know how to rectify it.
Yeah, tough question. Okay.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, because this is something else that I kind of find funny. So you're a professional. And for me, all that means is, because I've had to say this many times, whether I'm dealing with a student or I'm dealing, as you know, I'm a consultant, I have a big client portfolio. When you say to me, Pat, I'm a professional instructor, all I take that to mean is, me personally, is you make your living from jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So many people, because we know there's probably many more instructors out there that teach a night or two a week at an academy, and they're not professionals. They're not like us. They're not traveling for jiu-jitsu. They're not watching jiu-jitsu. They don't have the level of engagement because they work 40 hours a week. They got a wife. They got kids. Why is it, Cameron, do you think people get so miffed or rattled when you're like, well, I'm a professional? And like, I'll give you an example. The team weekends we have.
Yep.
We had half a dozen instructors there teaching, and one of the black belts at the host academy wanted to teach. And, so the instructor asked me, I said, all these teaching slots are for professionals. And seems to be that default, like, professional equates or is somehow married to skill. And that's not what I'm saying. It's like, we earn our living doing jiu-jitsu. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, there's again, I think there's sometimes a lot of entitlement where people are like, oh, I've been training this long or I've won these many titles, and that they automatically think they're an instructor. But I've seen some world champions that are horrific instructors. They have no rapport with students. They don't really know how to, for one thing, like, you need to be able to troubleshoot so many things as an instructor. You're going to have students with varying degrees of movement and mobility and athleticism to be able to do certain techniques. So do you have the skill set to be able to analyze why they're failing at a technique and being able to adjust it to work for their body type or their athleticism level? How can you, I've seen some instructors where it's like, you can't do that. Why can't you do that? Like, just, and they don't have the ability or the compassion to really troubleshoot a technique, for example. So I think there's a massive difference between jiu-jitsu skill and being a good instructor. I'm not the most accomplished competitor, but I think I'm a pretty dang good instructor when it comes to being able to, assess what somebody is capable of doing and how do I help them get to the technique for themselves. And I think that comes from the experience. And again, being a professional, are you studying tape? Are you watching matches? Are you studying instructionals? Beyond that, are you learning how to be a better communicator? Are you understanding, like, how to connect to people? Like, I have some students with severe ADD, and to give him instructions is a challenge. So are you going to be able to have the patience to work with those kind of situations as an instructor? And I feel like a lot of high-level people don't necessarily have that skill set. So again, if skill doesn't necessarily mean you're a good instructor.
So if someone were to ask you, you get an 18-year-old kid, he comes up to you right now, and he's a blue belt, and he says, Cameron, I want to make my life in jiu-jitsu. I don't want to work outside of the confines of jiu-jitsu. What do I do? And the question is, and this is really the crux of the episode, as a guy that started training at 18, you basically, I believe, became like a full-time jiu-jitsu instructor around 31, right? Yeah. And you may have, if you could go back in time, you might have changed your path to do things differently. What would you tell that individual?
The first thing, as a path, the first thing I would tell them that they need to learn how to communicate. This is a sport beyond just techniques. It's about communication. Can you connect with people? Can you be able to convey ideas to others? So, like, for example, if an 18-year-old came up to me at my academy, I would want to test their communication ability. Like, can you teach? After that, can you be coachable? You know, like you said, a lot of people stifle their own growth because they feel like they know better. So are you going to be able to be coachable? Are you going to be able to do things that maybe you're not comfortable with? You know, I don't think a lot of instructors at first are really stoked with teaching kids classes, but that's one of the best learning grounds to, like, if you can keep a 5-year-old's attention, you're going to be able to keep a room of adults probably captivated as well. So being able to deal with those different age ranges and things like that, like, are you willing to do the things that you don't like, that you didn't envision with jiu-jitsu? You know, like, for example, I never thought I'd have to do birthday parties, and I've done several birthday parties, you know, done summer camps, a lot of things that I'm not like super jazzed about, but it's part of what it is to be an instructor and to be part of you know, like running an academy. You're gonna have to do things that you don't like, or that you're not enthused about. Oftentimes, at least until you grow to a point where now you can pay somebody to do those things. But especially if you want to run your own academy, like when you're starting out, you're the go-to. Like, you're gonna have to do those things. You know, so I would say you need to be coachable first and foremost. Next is just like, show me your work ethic. Are you willing to show up and do instructor training before you teach classes and things like that? Like, are you willing to put in that effort?
Yeah, what I would tell people too is, because I've seen it all too many times, and I don't know why it's not talked about in our industry, is people have to get their money right. Because generally what happens is guys get engaged in the industry, they start traveling, they start learning, they generally at a certain point they rack up a bunch of debt, and they end up leaving the industry to address that debt. And you know, and how many people I've seen, like, guys, if you're going to be in this industry, you're going to be an entrepreneur, have your credit right, don't overspend. This is a huge issue in our industry. And you know, I don't know about you, Cameron, but I think it's a very, very rewarding industry. But yeah, I would tell people, get your money right and keep it right.
Yeah.
Because it's
No, I couldn't agree more. Again, like, if you also have bigger ideas, you're going to need, like, you know, you don't want to just be an instructor, you want to be an academy owner, you're going to need that as well. And that's, again, where if you can find an instructor who's able to potentially help you with that financial literacy, like, that's, again, like, when you're looking for somebody to help guide you in this, if you can find somebody who can do that as well, that's going to be hugely beneficial.
Okay, so we got about 5 minutes here, Cam, to wrap up.
Yeah.
I want to have a bit of a different format with my guests.
Cool.
I'm going to ask you a question, and it needs like a short answer, an abbreviated answer. And we're going to go through a bunch of questions.
Perfect.
Okay? Best thing about being an instructor?
I get to train jiu-jitsu all day.
Worst thing about being an instructor?
Firing students.
Okay, craziest student example?
Crazy good or crazy bad?
Craziest.
Craziest. Okay. Craziest student example. I had a student that we had to fire because they just, one of those things where if the instructor was looking at them, they were fine. But then if the instructor turned away, they'd be like, oh, look what I can do. And they would just be doing random techniques and like cranking submissions and just like literally to the point where, oh, Cam's not watching. And then they'd go do something ridiculous. And I would hear about it like months later. Yeah, that would probably be like the craziest one that I've ever experienced.
Best jiu-jitsu trip to date?
Austin, Texas last summer.
All right. Oh, I was there.
Yeah.
Biggest goal yet to achieve in jiu-jitsu?
Opening an academy of my own.
Okay. This is a question nobody thinks about. How long do you want to work before you retire?
I would like to be teaching classes till my 60s. Like, I would love to be on the mats. I always say I want to be Jean-Jacques. Like, that guy's still training, still, like, I want to be like Jean-Jacques.
Would you ever open an academy in a Sun destination?
I mean, I would love to. If I could convince my wife to move, that'd be amazing. Right? Who wouldn't want to do that?
What age should kids start doing jiu-jitsu?
My son is 2, and I have him training already, so as early as you can.
Scale of 1 to 10. For the masses, how important is competition?
I'd say about a 6. I think everybody needs to do 1. And if you hate it, never do it again. But I think everybody should do 1.
Best jiu-jitsu person you've ever rolled with?
Guy Mendez.
Gotcha. Okay. So, Cameron, in closing, do you have anything to say or words of encouragement? Because I'm hoping people are going to look at this episode, see a guy that started training jiu-jitsu as an 18-year-old kid. It's now your full-time vocation. And the whole goal of this specific episode was to say, listen, Cameron did it. And I would think, did you ever know your first few years you would do this for a living?
It was something I always wanted to, but again, I didn't know how, and I didn't know how to ask. So, it's funny because, like, if you chase your dreams but keep open the idea that they might look different, you'll probably accomplish them. Like, originally, I wanted to fight MMA, and that's how I wanted to be a professional martial artist. Now, I'm teaching jiu-jitsu. So, 18-year-old me, the idea is not the same, but the goal and, like, the end result is still the same. I'm a professional martial artist. I get to do this for a living. So, whatever your goal is, I would say just you have to dive in wholeheartedly without any sort of reservation, and just be open to the idea that may change. And if it doesn't look the way that you pictured, that doesn't mean that it's still not the same result. And for people coming up that want a career in the sport, like, you got to put yourself out there. You got to try to seek mentorship, and don't just wait for don't be like me and think that your technique is going to bring people to you and that they're just going to notice. If you want to make this your career, you have to go for it. You have to seek out mentorship, and you have to try to create those opportunities for yourself and be open to all that's going to come your way, because you don't know how that's going to where that road is going to take you.
And lastly, you are entering a new endeavor in the next couple months, and you're kind of going to dip your big toe into the world of promoting.
Yes.
And you're going to do a show in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
Are you excited for that? What do you want to take away from that experience?
The biggest thing is, like, everything I've been doing so far is trying to get more experience, because I want to be able to guide more students. Again, I'm still a little salty about nobody guiding me, so I want to be I want to be that mentor and that guide for students that I wish I had. So with promoting, I want to be able to, one, understand how that works, so I can help guide my students through navigating, dealing with different promoters. Two, as I want to be able to grow that side, so I can now provide opportunities for my students. So I'm really just kind of fascinated with the process, and really just hoping to learn more about it for myself, and acquire those skills so I can just provide more for my students. That's the ultimate goal with it is. And, if it goes well and maybe I got a knack for it, maybe that might be a new pivot for the career. So, I'm just really, really looking forward to it.
Okay, Cam, one thing I wanted to ask you was, I'm sure you've seen, I'm actively now trying to build my YouTube channel.
Yep.
And one of my questions is, depending how feedback we get on the episode and stuff, I wanted to maybe look at doing a live Q&A and, in about 6 months' times. And because I think you're a great case study for somebody that came in. You're in the industry 12 years before you started making money.
Yeah.
So I think you're a great example of it's never too late. I know you do a great job over there at Paradigm. And as you know, I'm always here to help you and with anything you need in your journey. And do you have anything to say in closing?
Again, thank you for the opportunity, and just anything I can do to help out to grow the podcast, I'd be more than happy to. Aside from that, I'm really active on Instagram, so if you guys want to check me out, Cameron.LePage on Instagram. If you ever want to send footage or anything like that, I'd be more than happy to study any tape or give you guys advice. So if you guys want to reach out, I'd be thrilled to help you guys.
All right, Cam. Well, it was great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to some future collabs with you.
Likewise. You have a great day, Pat.
Thanks.
You've been listening to the Jiu Jitsu Crucible podcast. Stay sharp, stay humble, and train hard.